Good afternoon, conversation 2. Now, I realize this is a little bit late, one day late. This is mostly because yesterday I was a little bit under the weather, and as you may have noticed from our website yesterday, I didn't update very many things because of the holiday. Everybody was traveling safely or staying home for their Chuseok, 5-day long weekend. So I was doing the same thing. As soon as this is uploaded, you should be able to access the link through the website as usual. I want to give a little bit of feedback first on the homework so far. I emailed a few people individually about certain things. I caught up to assignment 3 before the holiday, but the one that you handed in yesterday and today, obviously I have not looked at yet. And there's one more next week, which is today's topic. It's about homes. So there was lots of great stories coming in yesterday. I've already read some of them. In general, this is the thing. You need to be careful that you don't write your homework in a way that's a writing form instead of spoken form. So the whole point of this homework that I'm giving you is to remind you to prepare properly for the interview. So it's not like I'm going to reject your homework because you've written a really nice paragraph. But if it doesn't sound like something you would say, it's not the vocabulary or the form of the sentence, or it's not direct, the way that you would speak to me, then I think it's going to sound robotic or memorized when you do your interview in a couple weeks. We're on week 6 already. We didn't take any breaks so far, and we actually started one day early because of the Monday classes, joined the Tuesday class on the first week. So we got 2 weeks until the midterm. And your 5th assignment especially, I would recommend that you try to just write more of a script about the topic, the way that you would discuss the topic with me in class. Normally we would have more time to do that, and that's why next week we have a Zoom lecture again, so that you can practice how to say your answers, not just how to write them. So really what the homework is just to make you familiar with the topic so you have a story. Like when I say, tell me a good story, then you already know the story and the basic details, but the way that you say it is going to change every time. So you really, you don't need to focus too much on being perfect grammatically or having even perfect connections between sentences, because you can all listen to me do this video lecture and I'm saying ideas as I go, and that's how we speak, right? In my class last semester that I taught about global communication, we discussed how text messaging is more like speaking than it is like real writing. I shouldn't say real writing. Texting is real writing, but it's a digital conversation. And so you have to be careful that you don't write a paragraph, like a formal paragraph. Many of you are in composition classes too with me, so don't be confused. That's what I want in the composition class, so please do that. Very organized, very well connected, staying carefully on topic and supporting that topic. That's what composition class is designed to do. It's a different type of communication though. When you're in an interview, you have to be flexible. I'm giving you all the topics to prepare, but in a real interview, you're just going to know the topics in general, and then occasionally a question's going to be thrown in there that you've never heard before. And if you're not able to organize your ideas in your head and then, present them somewhat logically and express them to another person, then you're going to do poorly on an interview. So that's what we need to practice. A lot of students do better on the exam than they do on the midterm. But I'm telling you right now, I'm warning you, it's obvious if you've memorized your paragraph, whether you've written it as a speech or you've written it as a paragraph, that was formally written. So it's to your advantage just to prepare the topic, get comfortable with the basic ideas, even have some sort of outline. Well, I'm going to say this, this, and this, or first this happened, then this happened, and then just link them together, because that's going to be your advantage when we do our one-on-one interview for the midterm. So next week is assignment 5. The topic is the title of chapter 6, Home Sweet Home. Most of the stuff in the chapter is discussing, what goes into actually, the physical elements of a structure. I would think in some ways you just need to call that's shelter. That can be anything, as long as it has some walls and a roof. That's some type of house. But when we say home, especially when you say home sweet home, what you mean is probably a deeper connection, like some sort of emotional and psychological connection to a place, no matter what it's made of or where it's located or how nice it is. So as usual, let's just dig into the grammar for a second. They're talking about giving advice here, and when you advise somebody, you can modify the verbs using modal auxiliaries, and that would be, you can say something like should, or if you want to be stronger, you say must, right? Or you can say might. It's a variation of strength, whether you're going to use a stronger modal auxiliary or a weaker one. So these are all questions down on the page, at the bottom of page 53. They talk about using the imperative plus should the imperative should plus the base form of the verb in order to come up with some common questions, like asking somebody, where do you think this should go? Or where should I put this picture? Do you think we should buy or rent? Which tables look best in the living room? And does our friend think we should buy a new lamp? And then you give your advice. You answer yes, no, probably, maybe, or in my opinion, or in my experience, right? In my opinion, or in my experience, if you have the experience. Or you can say something like, I would think that for you, it would be too expensive to buy an apartment, so you have no choice but to rent. I was just talking about this the other day. When I finished university, or when I was in university, I didn't go around shopping for houses because there was nothing in my bank account to buy a house with. So necessarily, I was always looking to rent. And cheaper rent, nicer place, cheaper rent, some balance in between those two things. So that's how you discuss, how you're going to approach looking at a home, whether you're renting or it's in Korea or another country. There's all kinds of different systems for living somewhere. Some places you don't have to pay. You might be lucky enough to have some sort of perk with your job, so you have a dormitory as part of your, perks for your contract. It depends. So there's all kinds of different places. Now, my suggestion for your discussion of a home is just choose one of the places that you've lived. You've probably had many homes, and your feelings about each home are probably quite different. So let's turn this question into, focus on something that you've decided for one reason or another. This home, one reason or another, I should say, this home made a big impression on you. As usual, most of my questions are pretty open-ended, so it's up to you if you want to tell a negative story or a positive story or experience. Some people have only lived in one house. That's possible, and so you don't really have much of a choice. In that case, though, if you would like to move, or you think that in a couple minutes you can describe to me with some specific detail what you imagine you imagine you're going to live. Like you think you're going to get a job and live in an office in Busan, or you're going to move back to your home country and live with your parents in wherever they live, in a suburb or in a city or in the countryside. It doesn't really matter. You can go forward or backwards in your life if you want to do that. It just becomes a little bit more difficult grammatically, which, as I said to you, some students were asking, does grammar count? Grammar always counts. I try not to focus on grammar, but as you know, in this class, we usually do one grammar point each lesson. The main point about grammar is when grammar interferes with the communication of the idea. So, for example, if you tell me about your dream house and you're talking about it in the wrong tense, you should be using the future tense or maybe the conditional tense. Like you might be thinking something's a potential or possible future. So you'd be saying, if I get a good job and I make a lot of money, this is where I would like to live. You have to use the correct verb tense. You have to conjugate your verbs correctly for me to follow the information in your story. And if you don't, then you're going to lose points in the mechanics category in your interview. Okay, so just be aware. It's not just about choosing your favorite topic. It's also about choosing which one is sort of comfortable and more flexible and easier to talk about. This is one of the things that I often tell my students. When you're answering an interview question, it's not as important to be right or to be perfect as it is to give the impression that you're comfortable and you know what you're talking about. The whole point of the interview, it depends on what type of interview you're going for. Let me be clear. But what most interviews are looking for is they already have your resume and your experience. They might have sample of your writing, or you might have already given them your curriculum vitae or your portfolio, and they know that you're capable and smart and you've got good experience. So they're kind of making judgments about how well you perform under pressure and what your personality is like. And if you have the ability to interact with people and communicate effectively in a fairly nervous situation, in an environment where there's pressure. So it's to your advantage to choose a question that's not just your best answer or the best answer or even your favorite answer, but choose one that you're comfortable with for a variety of reasons. The language that's in it, the grammar that's involved. So consider that too. If there's a story you really want to tell, but it's really hard to get that out for one reason or another, doesn't matter if it's the emotions or grammar or topic related, then I would suggest trying a different topic. So home is like that too. You have lots of different choices here. Just choose the one that's easiest to talk about or the one that's most interesting. It's up to you. And describe it. They mentioned Feng Shui here. Feng Shui is just mispronounced Chinese. I guess it's a sort of strategy of design strategy in a house. It's become quite popular in the United States, and people believe that they can sort of consult an expert, and then they can arrange everything in a house so that the elements are all pointing in the right direction, and it gives you positive energy and things like this. I'm not going to go into it in detail because I'm not an expert about Feng Shui, but there is an article on page 54 and 55 which goes into great detail about design choices and this idea of conflicting elements of fire and water and things like that. You don't have to talk about the objects in your room necessarily or in your house. Like I said, you can choose what you want to talk about. Obviously, the people that are there, whether you're alone or with your family or with one other person, a partner or a roommate or another student, you got matched randomly or you chose your best friend. All of these things are maybe important details that go into how you feel about the place, which you describe as your home. I've only lived in 2 countries, just Korea and Canada, but I've moved many times, and there's a large variety of different types of houses, and it's hard to choose which one is my favorite, and I think I can't do that without also connecting certain memories. So I lived in a house for 7.5 years in the countryside when I was young, and it was not the nicest house that I've lived in, and it had a lot of things about it that were not that great. I mean, the closest department store was like an hour away by car. There was no movie theater in our town, so you had to drive about 30 minutes away to watch a movie. There wasn't any shopping or really any of the stuff that people in this city take for granted. Academies, hagwons, shops, stores, restaurants, all the kind of things that Koreans love to do, there's nothing. So I think if I was going to choose one house to describe, and I was really attached, this probably is my favorite home overall. Those 8 years of living there and walking by apple trees on the way to school, and riding my bicycle to high school, delivering newspapers after school, and meeting my friends and having lots of free time because there was no after school institutes to go to anyway. There was good points and bad points about it. I certainly learned, I played sports a lot, and I learned about camping and outdoors and how to take care of myself, and got lots of fresh air and exercise. If that's not your priority, you would maybe think that kind of home was boring or useless or underdeveloped. I'm not sure. I'm not originally a city guy, so I've now lived in cities since I was about 18. So I was raised partially in the city and for a while in the countryside, but I think that's the place that made the biggest impression on me because I love gardening and farming in my free time, and the relationship I have with nature and the environment and my attitudes were really profoundly influenced by that home. My mother always cooked for us. The house was big. The yard was huge compared to anything I've seen here. Nobody has a yard that big in Korea unless they're literally on a farm. So we had cats and dogs, and everybody had tons of space. When I came to Korea and I was in my 8pyong opistel beside Yuseong Onshan Station, it was a bit of a shock for a person who could have their own personal space, private space, outside and inside whenever they want. Still, some people in my family think I'm a little bit weird because I go outside a lot, just in and out the door. And it's partly because I feel like sometimes I'm trapped. And actually, since the coronavirus, I am trapped. This is my home, and I've lived in this apartment for almost 4 years. But it feels a little bit like a prison, this particular room, because I have to do so much work here. So my relationship with my home is different. So you have to choose one of these places. If I was going to choose this home right now, I'd probably focus on the online courses I'm teaching and my relationship with this particular room. And I could talk about, I spend a lot of time cooking sometimes, and I fall asleep on the floor a lot here because I've decided to become, I guess, more Koreanized. A lot of people like to sleep on the floor here. So I don't normally sleep on a bed. I sleep in a chair or on the floor. These are all things that I've chosen to talk to you about because they influence the impression that you get about my home. I love this apartment. It just doesn't have this connection with my memory and my emotions and my childhood. I was a pretty happy kid, especially in elementary school and middle school. So that home of mine, where I was that age, in Meaford, Ontario, that is the place I would choose to describe if I was going to describe the place that made me feel most at home, most comfortable. You set your own criteria. You can say most interesting. You can say the worst. You can choose the worst home that I ever had. Would probably be for me. That would probably be the Hyundai Officetel beside Yusung Onshan. But I also had kind of a rough time in my second year in university. When I was 20, I had to live in a student house where I had only one room to myself, and that was tough. But anyway, make your choice. Worst, best, most fun, most comfortable, most interesting, most expensive. You make a judgment and then describe the home to me, and tell me what made such a strong impression on you. And as I said, try to write the paragraph the way that you would explain it to me. So you can kind of jump from idea to idea a little bit more than you would if you're writing formally. So that's my recommendation to you. All right, I think that's where we'll leave it, and we'll pick up any strands that I left over next week in the Zoom lecture. So we do have the same sort of schedule that we did a few weeks ago. Monday's classes, and Tuesday we will have a 1 hour Zoom lecture. We go over an hour a little bit, probably, to give everyone a chance to listen to me and ask questions and talk to each other and practice before we set up a schedule for the midterm. So we'll cover, like I said, we will cover the loose ends next week. But for now, you have one more assignment, and hand it in on your day, Monday or Tuesday, next week, and that is the last one. And you'll have a little bit of some relief from homework before we do the midterm, and then we'll talk about what happens after that later. So thank you for listening. Sorry about the delay. I do have a bit of a sniffle. You might be able to tell, but everything's getting back on track. So I'll see you next week. Remember, I will send the Zoom invitation through the system by both text message and email. And make sure that you're prepared and that you log in on time, that you have a good internet connection and you're ready to go when the class is supposed to start. Okay, take care everyone, and see you next week on Zoom.